Hello everyone, this is Elonzo. Want to know how to get your first cloud job? Then please register for our webinar. We'll teach you everything that you need to know and answer your questions along the way. Hope to see you there. Hello everyone, this is Elonzo. Want to know how to get your first cloud job? Then please register for our webinar. We'll teach you everything that you need to know and answer your questions along the way. Hope to see you there.
My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired, guys.
I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired.
Because of Go Cloud Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Go Cloud team.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of Go Cloud Careers. I'm here with Mark Milunovic, who's our Chief Technology Officer, and he's here to help you build your best cloud computing career. Whether your goal is to be a cloud architect or a solutions architect or a network architect or an AI architect, we're here to help you build your career. Before we begin answering your questions, and please, we love answering questions, I wanted to tell you about a couple of things that we're really excited about. The Cloud Architect Career Development Program just celebrated its 3rd anniversary. And just yesterday, 2 more people told me they got great cloud architect jobs. And we're going to celebrate the anniversary with 50% off of all of our training programs. That's our Cloud Architect program, our Elite Architect program, our Enterprise Architect program, literally everything, because we are super excited about our anniversary and super excited about all the people that we now have working at Apple and Amazon and Cisco and IBM and Google and Accenture, Deloitte and KPMG and Microsoft and Capgemini and Barclays Bank and JP Morgan Chase and Bank and every other lead organization you can think of in the entire world. So we're super excited about it, and we're celebrating it by giving you 50% off while for a very short period of time. So take advantage of that anniversary. I also want to tell you that we have our free webinar on Thursday on how to get your first cloud architect job. We'll come on that webinar. You can ask questions about the role. We'll tell you about the role. We'll tell you about what we do. We'll tell you how to sneak past those pesky HR people that'll block you when you don't have 50 years of experience. You can go straight to the manager and get hired. We'll tell you what hiring managers want, what they dream about in the perfect cloud architect. And then we'll spend an hour and a half on Zoom consulting to you in your career to help you build your best cloud architect career. One last thing I wanted to tell you about, we've got a completely free guide on how to get your first cloud architect job. So download the free guide, take advantage of the free webinar, and if you're one of our students and you know who we are, take advantage of the sale. So we're here to answer your questions, so please ask us questions. I got to tell you, I'm excited about our conference. We have our conference in Orlando. Mark's excited about our conference, and it starts this weekend. But Mark asked me to come online and spend the day with you guys and answer questions anyway. So if you've got questions, ask them. We want to assist you.
Well, it wasn't much of twisting your arm, was it, Mike? You love doing these sessions, so.
Yeah, you didn't have to exactly force me into it. They're like, Mike, I know you're trying to pack. I know you got half of your cameras and your studio lighting and your audio gear packed up, but you still got your backup room. Let's do some training. So I'm here.
Exactly. All right, so make sure to ask your questions. Otherwise, Mike is going to go back and packing up his equipment, getting ready for the annual conference. Otherwise, I'm not sure how much I can twist his arm to come back.
So bring us your questions.
All righty. First question from CloudStation. Hi, Mike and the Go Cloud Careers team. Nowadays, there are so many people giving free information about how to succeed in landing a career in the cloud. How can we filter through these doubtful sources of information?
CloudStation, it's such a great question. And today, when I opened my LinkedIn feed, I was horrified. I saw somebody who just graduated an associate sales engineer program at Cisco, which meant a trainee, and she was guiding people on networking, and she doesn't even know networking, and it horrified me. I saw an associate solutions architect from AWS, which was a trainee. They couldn't complete their trainee position, guiding people on how to get cloud job, but she's never had one in her entire life. At the same time, I saw somebody today that talked about all the benefits from working from home and all the pros. And the cons, they listed 0. And I love working from home, but they didn't list any of the things that are there. So CloudStation, I have a rule. Ask people that are the most successful. So what do I mean by that? If someone has a title of associate, it's a trainee position. Run. They don't know what they know, and they don't even know what they don't know. They don't know where to begin, so avoid that. Next, if someone's had more than 5 jobs in 4 years, run, because here's the reason. People that can't stay at a job for more than a year typically leave before they get fired, or they can't be successful, they can't get promoted because they're not skillful and they don't know what to do, so avoid them too. Now, I want you to avoid any basic solutions architect. I want you to avoid any basic cloud architect. Now, here's the people that can really help you. I want you to look for the principal cloud architects, the distinguished cloud architects, the principal solutions architects, and here's the reason why. They've made it. They're the ones that are successful. When someone gets their first tech job, they may not even know how they got it. They may think it's related to one thing, but it's often not. But when somebody's made it to principal level or distinguished level, they know. Now, also, who else can you ask? The director of architecture, who's already most likely been an architect and been hiring architects for years, a VP of architecture, a chief information officer, or even a chief technology officer like our Mark Milonovich. And these people have made it. They've been successful and they can help you. So you got to cut through the noise. Now, the good news for me, Cloud Station, is I trained in medicine before. And you know what they used to say? They used to say, Mike, you got to go to a peer-reviewed journal. Stay away from the Ladies' Home Journal. Stay away from Cosmopolitan Magazine. Stay away from Time Magazine. And they said, the Journal of the American Medical Association is appropriate. The British Medical Journal is appropriate. So, you know, I always look for the best of the best. I get my information from people that have made it. So that's one of the reasons we have David Linthicum on our channel. Again, he and I have been peers for decades. We've been working in this cloud from the beginning, and he can help you. You know, I have Christina Marino come on this channel. Why? She's the president of a recruiting firm, and she's got 20-some years experience recruiting technology professionals. She's been there. She's made it. She's the president. So that's really the secret. The secret is the following. You've got to find people that have been successful. You know, when I was in high school, there was a picture, and it was called Parable of the Blind. And you've probably seen it. It's a famous picture. And you had a bunch of blind people holding each other in the shoulder, and they were running around in circles. And here's the reason they didn't dare. So, you know, find someone with a principal title, a distinguished title, a director title, a VP title, or a C-suite title. And you do that, Cloud Station, you're going to get there. So Cloud Station, I'll tell you what I did. When I first started my career, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I got my first job. And as soon as I got it, I said to my manager, can I speak to the VP of architecture? And my manager's like, Mike, what the heck do you think you're doing? And I said, Dave, let me ask you this question. I said, if I wanted to ask the VP of architecture, what is the perfect architect and what he wants and the people that are going to be the best of the best, would you be okay with that? And my manager says, yeah, Mike, this is great. So I asked the VP of architecture. He gave me a list of things. Now, I'm going to tell you, 90% of those lists was not technical. 10% was technical, 90% was non-technical. I did that. And guess what? 2 years later, I was a principal architect. So I kind of keep that in the back of your mind. That's exactly where I'm coming from. So keep that in the back of your mind. Ask a principal, ask a distinguished, ask a director, a senior director, a VP, but stay away from anybody new.
I agree. Find somebody with a track record. You're mentioning, how do you go through doubtful sources? Number one, why are they doubtful to you? Is that maybe their first post? Have they been only in the business for the past 6 months? What is the reason that they're doubtful? And then again, reverse engineer the positions of these people. What positions have they worked in? Does that go in line with what you're trying to reach out to? If you're looking for somebody that's going to help you when it comes to career advice, what is their track record in that? Even when you look for recruiters, we naturally want to go for recruiters. Look them up. How many people have they placed? What industry do they work in? What do they specialize? So it's going to take some research on your end to be able to go through the fluff or filter through that noise. But my best advice, just like Mike said, find somebody who's been doing it for a long time, who has an authoritative voice in that space, and you should be good to go. All right, next question is from Cookie Monster. Says, hey, Mike, what do you think about Gen AI and cloud computing?
Well, first, Cookie Monster, I love the name. I always loved the Cookie Monster. That was my favorite character from Sesame Street. I used to read the C is for Cookies book to my little sister when she was growing up. Here's what I think. AI is not new. I've been working with AI for 2 decades now. But generative AI is relatively new, and it's quite exciting in what it can do. And when it comes to generative AI, we have to make a choice. Do we host it ourselves, or do we outsource the hosting? And now we go to that same discussion. Do we build a private data center, or do we go to the public cloud? So Cookie Monster, in every architecture, we're going to have to ask ourselves the following questions. Now, I'll tell you this. If we build it ourselves in the data center, it will, generally speaking, cost much less to build it ourselves. The performance will be better if we do it ourselves, but we own it. What do I mean by own it? It means in our data center, we have to think about the networking, the power redundancy, the backup generators, the backup batteries, the cooling, all the cool networking, which, Mark and I get really excited about because we love that stuff. It's a chance for us to geek out. Then our servers and our storage infrastructure. But by doing so, it's typically, the latest data is about 2.5 times cheaper to host it ourselves. Now, if we build it on the cloud, we can start today. We don't have to get those GPUs from NVIDIA. And actually, Cookie Monster, we actually have to figure out what the type of computing we're using. Is it going to be CPU bound? Is it going to be GPU bound? Is it going to be TPU bound? Is it going to be a fully programmable ASIC or an ASIC generative AI system? And we don't know without seeing it. So anything I'm talking about is conjecture and speculative because the business requirements will always drive the architecture. But on the cloud, it's there. Cloud providers already bought this stuff. And we're going to pay a premium to use it, but it's already there. Now, when we use the cloud providers, we can also use some of their pre-made machine learning libraries and generative AI libraries, which helps. And then it brings us back to this conversation of, do we need custom or do we want commercial off the shelf? And Cookie Monster, I like to look at it this way. If I wanted a good steak and I was in the US, I would go to Morton's or Ruth's Chris. And when I go there, I can say I want it charred on the outside and rare on the inside. I would like it filleted. I'd like Oscar. I can get it any way that I want. And ultimately, that will be the best steak for me, if that's my goal. And if I go to the cloud, they have these pre-made libraries, just like McDonald's and Burger King. You can get your Big Mac really fast. You can. Or your Whopper or whatever they call it. I don't really eat fast food. But that's really what the cloud providers' pre-made services are. They're there. These libraries are done for you, and you can use them, and you can use them simply. So then Cookie Monster, the business decision really needs to be, do you need that steak, or do you want that cheeseburger from McDonald's? And there's strengths and weaknesses of each approach. Things that are on the cloud are fast, they're agile, and agility is worth a lot. Speed of a pre-made library is great, meaning you don't need as many developers, which is again great, because your goal is to have as little staff as possible from an operational perspective and an operational expense perspective and a total cost of ownership perspective, sometimes. So we really have to weigh all the factors. But I love generative AI. I think it's going to do a lot. I love cloud computing, and I think it's excellent. So to me, it's all about choosing the best option for our clients. So I came from medicine, and I'm thankful I did. Because when it came from medicine, they really taught me architecture, which is how to solve problems. And they taught me that for every action or every modality we use, like every prescription we write, there's things that it does to help and things that it does to hurt. And with every architectural choice we make, there's things that we win on and things that we lose on. Go to the data center. Wow, I can have 100 gig connections between our servers to the switches all day long. Guess what? Now, by comparison, on the cloud, I'm stuck with whatever they give me. I can't run the high-speed networking. I can't prioritize my traffic. I can't use QoS. I lose so many things, but I don't have to think about it. I don't need a Mark on my team that can plan this network. And I don't need a team of people to build that network either. So, some weaknesses. It comes down to balance. So, I think cloud computing is good. It's the modern version of the network in the data center that we've had for the last 30 years or so. But generative AI really changes a lot. It changes so much. And the reason it changes so much is now we can do things. We can write code, and the generative AI limits the number of software developers we need. So keep that in the back of mind. Generative AI enables us to do more with less. Generative AI can write content. It can create chatbots to improve the customer experience. So Cookie Monster, like any other architecture, it's about finding the right use case for the right technology to solve the right problem. Kind of like giving you cookies for the Cookie Monster. You know, there's a Cookie Monster that may like oatmeal cookies versus a Cookie Monster that might like chocolate chip cookies. But the Cookie Monster I saw on Sesame Street loves it all. So Mark, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say that if I had to pick, if this was a customer that I had to pick for, then 1000% it would depend on their requirement. What is it that we need it for? And then what to pick. What kind of model of generative AI I would pick? Would I go into the virtual data center, cloud computing, be able to rent the equipment? Let's say, my operational expenses, my budget is more on that side compared to my CapEx, I would do that. Now, you know me, Mike, I'm a little biased when it comes to our own private data centers. That's what I am a little bit biased because we control everything. Anything and everything we can control. It doesn't matter. Networking, we can control. The actual compute, we can control. The security, 100%, we can control all that. And on top of that, I can then pick the GPUs, the CPUs. If I want to have specific programmed processors, I can pick the ASIC as well. That means now I can also control my performance. But what I really like about bringing it in-house, and let's say money aside, right? Let's say money is not an issue. We can do all this. We got the budget for it. I like the idea of having my AI tool in-house so I can train it on my data and not have to worry about having that up in the cloud on a shared network. I know the security is pretty good in the cloud, but I just don't like the idea of having to transfer some sensitive information over the internet, even if I have security, because we all know that anytime anything leaks out of your network, it's never fully secure. So I'm a little bit biased to the on-prem data center and being able to train the Gen AI in-house. Well, that's just my opinion. But when it comes to the customer, of course, always find out what the requirements are and what you need to use it for.
Absolutely. So ask us your questions so we can assist you.
Simon, he asks, hi, Mike, since executives' time is valuable, how to gather information from them in meetings? Is it a question list necessary?
So, Simon, you do have to have a series of questions, but you have to know what kind of questions to ask. So, I teach my students how to be consultants because architects are consultants. And, either you're like me and you've been trained in consulting and you've done an MBA and learned how to consult and you know how to ask those mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive type questions. Because if so, that's the case, you need to do so. So keep that in the back of your mind. Yes, you need to have a question list, but ideally before you meet that executive, you should have some information about the organization. I hope you've read that organization's financial statements. I hope you've looked at that organization's balance sheets. I hope you've looked at the 510Ks, those documents, the financial documents they put out there. I hope you're looking at what analysts are saying about it. I hope you're looking at what employees are saying about it. And I hope the people that called you or set up the meeting also have some intel. We've got to go in there and we've got to ask the right questions. We have to. And then based upon a question and the response, we need to know what other kind of questions to ask. So, Simon, this is why I spent about 700 hours training cloud architects, because it literally takes me 700 hours to get people prepared to have enough knowledge and enough depth where they even know where to begin to ask the question. So that's really the secret. If I bring in Mark on a networking thing, he knows exactly what questions to ask. And sure, he's going to prepare for that meeting, but he's going to be able to know when I tell Mark, for example, and I say, Mark, we have 15 BGP peers, and we've got an IBGP mesh that we've divided into 3 confederations, and we've got route reflectors in each confederation. He's going to understand that, and then he's going to say, okay, why have you broken into confederations? What loop avoidance strategies have? Why do you need so many peering sessions? Is it latency? He's just going to know because he's got that. And that's one of the reasons, Simon, I hate to see people get like 10 different certifications in junior level things because they spread themselves so thin. They don't have the knowledge or the depth that they need to be able to ask these questions. Architecture is a specialty career. I mean, people don't realize it. Yeah, sure, we're a little bit of a generalist on the tech. We're dealing with networking and data center and security concepts and all clouds. But here's the thing. We've got to be able to understand that corporate vision, understand business. If we don't understand business as architects, we're not useful as architects at all. We're terrible. Here's the reason why. Our job is to optimize business performance. If we don't know business, what are we fixing? That's like a doctor that doesn't know anatomy, physiology, and pharmacology. How are they going to examine the patient if they don't know? So that's a good question, Simon. But then we also have to prepare for the meeting. So let's say I'm going to go to a generative AI meeting. And let's be fair. In a perfect world, I'm going to bring David Lithicum with me because he's our generative AI guy that I would talk to for most situations. But even if I couldn't, I'm going to ask him and 5 or 6 other generative AI people and a bunch of data scientists. Could you tell me what the main pain points are that organizations have? What are the tools that we have out there? What kind of tools do we have and what kind of problems do they solve? And I'm going to do my pre-initial reconnaissance. I'm going to read those balance sheets. I'm going to read those financial statements. And I'm going to come up with a paper list of questions that I plan on asking. But As General Patton said, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy. So I've got a plan. And I typically have a backup plan in questions, and I typically have a backup plan, but in the end, I'm going to end up adapting, improvising, and overcoming based upon what I hear. So that's why you've got to have a lot of depth. That's why you've got a lot of knowledge. And when you get all those things, Simon, and it was nice to meet you last week on our Zoom webinar, you're going to know what to ask and how to ask. You know what happens as we get better architects, Simon? It's not that we have all the answers. We just know which questions to ask. And that's why I say try to stay away from those associates, because they don't know what they don't know. And then you reach a point once you get to that principal level where you realize the world is so big, you now know what you don't know. And this is kind of one of those interesting things. And then when you get there and you know what you know and you know what you don't know, then you're even better at asking the right questions. So that's how I would look at it, Simon. Mark, anything to add to this?
I would say be prepared. Preparation takes research. Vet the persons and the people that you're going to be talking to. Your first meeting initially is never going to be with the executive. So that means you're going to have time to take a look what public information is available. You most likely are going to be meeting with other people first in that particular organization. Make sure you get your questions answered by them so that when you're finally ready to actually go into the meeting with the executives, that you're not asking questions that they're going to roll their eyes at you for. So in the end, gather information, and then make sure that information that you couldn't gather from the other people, that then you gather from the executives. But again, once you get to that executive level, you're predominantly going to be asking business information. You're not going to be asking an executive about configurations or route reflectors when it comes to your BGP peerings. That's not going to work. That you're going to be talking to either the network architect or the senior network engineer. That's the type of person you'd be talking to gather that information so that you can now match it up to what you hear from the executives. So again, the biggest thing is reconnaissance. We'll learn about the company, learn about the people, and then prepare for that. All right, Uman, Mike's guidance is precious. Preparing a community for the present and future in tech. Thank you so much, Umang.
Umang, thank you so much. Umang, it was such an honor to work with you. I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, and then you got a great architect job in India. I remember when we first spoke. I remember how far you grow, and it's always makes me happy to see your name. Thank you so much for the kind words. Again, it was such a privilege to work with you, and I'm super excited about your success.
Question for Ahmed. Hello, Mike. I'm a big fan from Palestine, and I want to thank you for your videos about advanced networking in AWS. I passed the exam with amazing scores. Much more comment.
Assalamu alaikum, Ahmed. It's super nice to see you on this channel. I am thrilled that our training was able to help you. I am thrilled that you passed that exam, and I'm thrilled for your success. So keep coming back. Let us know what we can do. Hopefully you can ask us some questions so we can try and assist you in your career, because I want to do anything I can for you. But thank you so much for being here.
Congratulations, Ahmed. This is a question from Emperor. Hi, Mike. I'm currently in the Comte A+ program in my state. So the company offers Network Plus and CCNA. But I don't know which one will be better for a person trying to be security architect.
Okay, so Emperor Akira, let me give you some guidance. If it was only based upon the technical merits, CompTIA certifications would be great. Mm-hmm. They are good certifications, and they actually have good information in them. Unfortunately, from a marketing perspective and a saturation perspective, while you may learn really good things in them, they will ultimately hurt your brand as an architect, and here's the reason why. The CompTIA A+ is associated with PC repair. So think the people that work at the Best Buy Geek Squad that put a video card or reinstall Windows. It does not inspire the architect view. It shows intro level, potentially help desk or PC repair. So Emperor Akira, I'm glad you're doing the A+. It will teach you about desktops and workstations, and it will help you understand servers better. But I don't want you to put it on your resume. Same thing when it comes to Net Plus. It is a very good certification if you look at the merits of content, 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 and content. Very good. And it's vendor neutral, which makes it even better. But again, it pops into the person's mind, the junior level, ready to potentially almost do help desk if they're lucky. And that doesn't inspire architecture concepts, which is a business executive and a leader. So please don't do the Network Plus. And if you do the Network Plus and the A Plus, great. Just don't put them on your resume. And believe me, Emperor Kiro, I've got lots of certifications that you would never see on my resume. You really do. In fact, I remember when my manager asked me when I reached a certain level of architects to take off the CISSP and the CCIE, which I did reluctantly and my career did better. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, the CCNA, again, is a very junior level one, but the CCNA is much more than the AWS Advanced Networking, which means it's a good one. So if I was you, Emperor Kiro, I would not focus on the CompTIA, and I would do the CCNA and CCNP, which is going to look better, much stronger. But if you're doing this A+, and you're at least take advantage of the learning, really learn about that CPU and how it works. Learn about that PCI bus and PCI architecture and servers. Learn about the storage ports that exist on a motherboard, whether they be SATA ports, whether they be SAS ports for SAS grade enterprise drives, or how an NVMe drive would connect into that server. Learn a lot about how the BIOS in these systems does what it does. Learn about how the RAID cards would be put in there and what a GPU does, and dive deep. See, here's the thing about certifications. They can be a very good framework to say, learn this, learn this, learn this, learn this. They can. The problem is most of the certifications that are out there, not the CompTIA ones, are all kind of like, here's the name of a service and here's how to configure that service. Now, CompTIA yesterday, I got somebody that's never worked in tech hired as a security architect. And Emperor Kiro, if you're in our program, you'll have our recommendations. So we recommend the CISSP for security architects and a professional cloud certification. And here's the reason why I like the CISSP. It's the only one of the few certifications out there that actually pertain to security architecture. So if you deal with like an AWS Advanced Security, there's no architecture in there. It's about how to configure AWS stuff, which we architects don't do. We don't touch the technology. We design it. And if you do the CISSP, and again, you need to learn security outside of that, but that's a good certification to match the training that you're getting. At least it'll teach you how to assess an organization's needs. It'll teach you about how to determine what kind of security policy an organization needs, how to quantify and value the degree of protection that that organization needs. It will talk to you about when you would use a honeypot, how you would set up or design a demilitarized zone. It will talk to you about endpoint protection. It'll talk to you about IDS, IPS systems, host-based firewalls, VPN concentrators, and all that goes to it. And it's not going to waste your time teaching you how to configure stuff, which is somebody else's job, because we need to know how to design as architects, not how to build. Now, Emperor Kiro, by comparison, if you said I wanted to be a hands-on security engineer, now I'd be talking some deeper things. And I'd have to say, do you want to do penetration testing? In which case we'd look at things like an OSCP or a CEH master, versus, because that's a hands-on penetration, breaking in, ethical hacking kind of thing. So it's all about what your goals are. But as a security architect, unfortunately, the CompTIA things aren't going to get you there. Now, the next question you're going to ask is, I don't have 5 years experience. How do I take the CISSP? Well, you're going to do what I tell you, which is just take the exam, and you'll be able to claim CISSP-associate on your resume, and everybody will know. So Emperor Kiro, just yesterday, I had a conversation with someone that got hired. This person applied for a position to be a security analyst. I don't know why they applied to be for a security analyst position, because I trained them, and they've never worked in tech before, but they applied for this. And when they went on that security analyst interview, they said, you're too good to be an analyst. I'd like you to apply for the cloud security architect job. So the person says, sure, I'll apply for the cloud security architect job. And when that person trained by us showed off his executive presence, his communication skills, his leadership skills, they said, you know, this cloud security architect job is a little too low for you. How about we bring you in as a security architect responsible for security on the cloud and off the cloud? And he just accepted the position, and I am super excited for him. And this, of course, is going to be his first tech job. Why? Because he's so good. So focus on designing the solution, Emperor Kiro. Focus on being able to obtain the business requirements. Focus on being able to deliver that security presentation to an audience and get them to buy into your systems. Focus on your leadership skills, your sales skills. These are the skills of the architect. certifications, and I love them. They will get you an interview, which is great. And if you do certain certifications like a CISSP, they will give you maybe 10% of the skills you need as the architect, which is a huge win, huge win. But focus on the architect skills, focus less on hands-on tech jobs. You know, my good friend David Lithicum wrote an article in InfoWorld, and, you know, I'm actually, you know, what I liked about it, and maybe I'll find the quote, I'll pop it in here. He said that he would be, what he said in the article was almost no certification has anything to do with architecture, just like I said. And he also said I would be very hesitant to hire someone with just an AWS certification or just an Azure certification. And the reason he would be hesitant is not the skills. He would be hesitant when you do a vendor certification, they create a bias in you, which forces you and convinces you that this is the best technology. And when you've got a bias toward any technology, it tends to damage your responses to your customers. So I'm going to see if I can pull out that blog from InfoWorld, because it's a really good blog. Because I really want you guys to get that. For us as architects, we can't afford any bias whatsoever. We have to be looking at what we can do for our clients and how we can assist them. So I hope that answers your question. And please, 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 it's a great article. It's in this Why We Need Both Cloud Architects and Cloud Engineers. I'm going to pop that in the chat box for you because I think it's really important. You know, he and I share a very similar philosophy. Why? Because we've both been architects for a few decades. But, you know, kind of keep this in your back of your mind.
Next question from Simon. Recently, I saw a job title, Hybrid Cloud Architect. Since all clouds are similar, is this role more like a general cloud architect or a specialized cloud architect?
Well, Simon, if you watched our video yesterday, we talked about why job descriptions are usually worthless and meaningless, and most job titles are meaningless. I remember I had one architect position and they couldn't figure out how to pay me enough, so they called me a customer success manager at a company. And the reason they did that is it had a higher grade, which had a higher pay variability than just the technical solution architect that they had. So they made up a role for me and they gave me a funny name. And then at one point I was a vertical IBSG manager in charge of an entire vertical's architecture. And then they're just senior manager. So I don't worry about titles. I worry about job functions. But here's the thing. A hybrid cloud, which is very common, is, and that's assuming they mean this, is a data center plus a cloud. Now, Simon, why would an organization use that? I can build a Nutanix or an OpenStack cloud, my own private cloud, and get better performance, better security, and a lower cost than if I go to the public cloud. So by doing so, I can build myself my beautiful cloud. I can get the fanciest AMD EPYC servers. I can get these 19 million IOPS RAID cards, pop them in my servers. I can run this 100 gig network backbone with bundling 8 links and link aggregation groups and having multiple links and deliver the coolest performance in the world. And I have that. And I can do that and I connect that to the public cloud, say AWS or Azure. When I need capacity in my cloud, it automatically will scale out to the public cloud and I'll have capacity at all times. My data center goes down, the public cloud will take over, no problem. Public cloud goes down, it doesn't matter, my data center is still up. So hybrid cloud is one of the most common cloud architectures. And a real cloud architect is always a hybrid cloud architect. So that's really the key. A real architect, a real cloud architect is dealing with all the clouds. 98% of organizations use more than one cloud. 98%. Which is one of the problems with solution architect certifications. They teach you how to do something in a single cloud. Keep that in the back of your mind. So I want you to get that. So hybrid cloud, 2 clouds. A cloud architect really is going to design hybrid clouds, multi-clouds, hybrid multi-clouds anyway. So it's an organization that didn't really understand what the cloud architect was. And then they thought they hired cloud architects to all go to a cloud provider. Then they got their cloud bill and they went, whoa, they told me this was going to be cheaper. In the cloud practitioner exam, they said economies of scale make it cheaper. And then they found out that hyperscale is not economies of scale. It becomes much, much more expensive, and they went to the cloud and now they're coming back. So expect all cloud roles to be hybrid multi-cloud, just like we said they'd be 3 years ago. In fact, Simon, 3 years ago when we started this program, we had a choice of teaching an AWS solution architect or an Azure solution architect or teaching a cloud architect role. And I said I would never teach just an AWS or just an Azure because I knew that 98% of organizations would use more than one cloud. So now you know it is a hybrid cloud architect role.
I'm going to have to add this just to demonstrate how little you should care about job titles in general and descriptions, so to say. I've been there in the meetings when, how would I put this delicately? When the people with pull were trying to decide on how to justify a raise for a person, because they wanted to give them a promotion and a raise. They on the fly made up a title, a new position for that person just to justify the raise.
Yep.
Nothing changed within their responsibilities. Just out of like thin air, just made up, just like money, right? Out of thin air, just magically appeared. So that's one thing to show you that it's relatively irrelevant for that. I've seen other occasions too, and I've spoken to these engineers that they were brought in a company and they got a fancy title. And I asked them, it says like, have you ever seen, they were referred, just so you understand, have you ever seen your job description and the title assigned to it? They go like, no. So I provided it to them. The job title did not match the job title they received. The actual description of the job they wanted them to do did not match the description of what they ended up doing. So it was irrelevant. It was just for show. So I would definitely say if you don't pay so much attention to it, maybe just for search criteria so you can find a job. But other than that, always try to find out more. Ask questions. What is it really that we're doing here? Because if you notice, it's an architect position, but they want you to be a programmer. Well, are you a program architect? Because a cloud architect wouldn't do it, a network infrastructure architect wouldn't do that. They're more on the business side. They're more designing instead of the actual implementation operations of this. So ask questions and find out exactly what they mean. I will probably say 9 out of 10 times, they have no clue what they're doing or writing down in that description.
Yeah, I've never seen a job description that was actually real in my entire life. And honestly, I haven't seen a job title that was very real either. I don't worry about it. I just do what the company needs me to do and what my manager
I'm not
wants
exaggerating. Out of thin air, they just made it up on the spot because they need to justify it. It means nothing really. You know, I've seen them literally go from network engineer 1, 2, 3 just to justify the raises. It does make a difference, really.
Mm-hmm.
But good question. Von Ahmed, as a refugee, how can I work with big companies such as Silicon Valley companies if there's a gap between my country jobs experience and their experience?
So, Ahmed, your experience doesn't matter. Your ability to do the job means everything. When I took my first job, they wanted 10 years experience and I had 0. Yesterday, I had a student that took a job, they wanted 10 to 15 years experience and he had 0. It's not your experience, it's your knowledge. I've met many people that have no experience that are great. And I've interviewed people because I did a lot of strategic outsourcing where you'd interview the employees that have been working at the company for 20 years and try to figure out what they were doing. So you could say, keep them hired when you went outsourced. And I couldn't figure out what they did or what they didn't know. I know plenty of people that have been around for a while that know nothing. And I know some people that are good. I've seen 14-year-olds break into highly secure environments with no training and no certification because they were that good. And I've seen them defeat people with a PhD and 10 certifications and 30 years experience, even though they had no training. You've got to be good. So Ahmed, what are you doing to be great? What are you doing to build your knowledge? What are you doing to go out there and build your brand? That's the secret. I had a student, Robert Welch. I taught him how to make LinkedIn posts in our course. Each day he had 5 new interviews. Every day, just from his content that he was creating. So what are you creating? You know, Ahmed, when I was younger, I wrote a paper called Intro to IP Multicast. I wrote it when I worked for a company called Riverstone Networks. I had a friend that was working at Cisco 20 years later, and he was using that document that I wrote back in 2000, in like 2018, to troubleshoot IP multicast networks. Now, as soon as I wrote that document, the next thing that I realized is my dance card got full, if you will. And it was, Mike, I need you to go to Silicon Valley. And when you're in Silicon Valley, then I need you to go to Alberta, Canada. And then I need you to go to Calgary and go talk to, I think it was TELUS. Then I need you to go fly over to Ottawa, which is Canada, and go talk to Alcatel. Mike, when you're done that, I need you to go to DC. When you're done that, I need you to go to North Carolina. When you're done that, I traveled 200,000 miles that year just because of a paper I wrote. That took me immediately from my first junior level architect job to a principal architect, which they wanted 15 years experience. And of course I had 6 months, but that's neither here nor there, less than 2 years, but that's the key. So what are you doing to be great? What is it, the one thing that you want to do, Ahmed? And what are you there? If you're being an architect, what are you doing to develop your business acumen? And how are you demonstrating your business acumen? If you want to be a security architect, what are you thinking about? What's the difference between defense in depth and zero trust? And why will both fail if you use either one by themselves? What can you do by combining them together? How can you achieve an organization's security? What goes into security? What questions do people ask? How will AI impact security? How can AI protect security versus how can AI hurt security? That's the kind of things that you need to do. That's the kind of things that you need to show the world that you're an expert on. And people will bring you in if you're good. They really will. When I go to my home in Greece, which I love being, the souvlaki is good, the gyros are good, and there's cats that literally walk down the street and they come up to you, dogs too, I feed them all. I end up having a house full of animals that aren't even my own every time I go to my village, but that's good. I go to the ocean or the thalassa every day, and I can work from home in my village because I've built a brand. So go out there and build deep knowledge. Focus your energy on what matters. If you want to be an architect, don't learn things like SQL, learn system design. If you want to be an architect, don't learn to code because that's somebody else's job. Learn business. So what are you doing out there to be good? Because there is a shortage of people. Now, Ahmed, I've got some even better news for you. What's been going on is in the US, we've had very low labor productivity in a couple of years. And what that means is people tend not to be doing their jobs. For better, for worse, I don't know why, what have you, I've got great people on my team. And it's happening in the UK, it's happening in Europe, it's not a US thing. And then companies after the pandemic had said, come back to the office. And employees are saying, I'm not coming back. So guess what? If people don't go back to the office after they're being called back to the office, does it matter if you're in Palestine? Does it matter if you're in Libya? Does it matter if you're in Lagos, Nigeria, or Cape Town, South Africa, or New York City? If you're not going to go to the office anyway, who cares? So guess what? That's going to open up more and more and more opportunities for you. So go out there and show the world what you can do. Master your career. I mean, truly master it, but don't learn other people's jobs. In the 20 years of technology career consulting I've done, that's the biggest problem. Somebody wants to be an architect and they learn SysOps, which is maintenance, or Linux, which is somebody else's job, or DevOps, which is somebody else's job, or coding, which is somebody else's job. And then I ask them architecture questions and they don't know the career. So master your career. And remember, as architects, because I think that was your goal, if it's not your goal, tell me. We are not engineers. I've got engineers with 20 years that I need to train just as much to be an architect as somebody that's never had any experience. So go out there and be great. Please, Ahmed, ask more questions. It sounds like you need some help, and I would love to help you. I truly would.
Yeah, I would just add, make them an offer that they cannot refuse. And that generally includes the whole package. Don't have one single facet to yourself, but be multifaceted. Example, I'm going to take the other route. Let's say you want to be an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
What can you offer as an engineer that 99% of the other engineers are unable to do? I guarantee you, it's not going to be on the technical side because there's some ridiculously smart people out there.
Yep.
I've met them. They're ridiculously smart. But what are they not good at, perhaps? Selling, presentation, communication. They can't read a room. They have no idea how to make people want to work with them. But they'll rattle off you the entire RFC, so to say. So work on these, what we call intangible or soft skills, whichever you want to call them, and then add it to, let's say you want to be an engineer, to your technical skills. And that way you make these companies, once they observe your competency and offer, they cannot refuse. They'll come chasing you, irregardless of where you are, but they have to be able to see that from you.
And Mark and I are both from places where they didn't necessarily have the most robust economy.
Yep. We weren't just given anything or everything. We had to work for it too. And that included getting better, finding out what works, what doesn't work. Because many times, you know, I know for Mike, I know for myself, we didn't have access to what you all have access to. No. Just to be able to come on YouTube for 2 hours, ask any questions you want to, and then actually get some guidance on it. That doesn't mean we know all the answers, but we do try based on our experience and what we've seen work and not work with students. So make sure you ask your questions as well. But I hope that answers your question, Ahmed. Simon, cloud architects usually have years of tech experience to showcase to clients. How can someone with no tech experience impress clients after landing a cloud architect job?
Well, by being good at your job. I don't care about your experience, and I've asked thousands of employers, and experience doesn't come up. What comes up is I need the person to be able to do the job and do it well. Now, I'm going to actually talk about the biggest challenge that our engineers have in a minute, and why it's often easier to take someone that's untrained and get them an architect job than it is an engineer. And I'm going to go back to Mark for that one for a little bit, because I know he's gone through the transition. So when you go in your job, can you sell to the client? If you can sell more than your competition, you've already gotten promoted, because they measure you by your effectiveness in terms of sales. We don't touch the technology, Simon. We're not even allowed. If you tried to touch the technology in 90% of architect jobs, security would escort you out and you'd be picking up your severance pay. So we have to design solutions. So Simon, what are your presentations like? What are your thought leadership documents you like? What kind of RFI, RFP, RFQ responses are you providing? When you go give a speech, what's the customer satisfaction score? How much revenue did you bring in that company? The engineers that work for you when you design your systems, what do they say about you? These are the things that you're going to be measured on. But I don't really care about your background. Debbie Griffin came to us. She had 1 million certifications. We retrained her and we got her hired her first solution architect job at LeaseWeb with no background whatsoever. Al Legister's last job was selling customer products at Kimberly-Clark, and we got him a senior solution architect job at Deloitte as his first tech job. Noah Parker was a social worker before his solution architect after our training at AHEAD. Vladimir was a 24-year-old college student before we got him his first solution architect job at North Highland. Jennifer Emo was a mental health tech before we got her first solution architect job at JP Morgan Chase. Jermaine was selling landscaping gear before his first enterprise architect job at Southern New Hampshire University. Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom before we got her hired at Microsoft. Jordan Kitku is going to be presenting at our conference this weekend, was a college student with no experience before we got him hired by AWS. And I don't mean an associate architect, I mean a real architect. Delroy Batt was an emergency medical technician on ambulances before we got him his first cloud security architect job at CDW. Jeffrey West was a geologist before we got him his first solution architect job at Calient. Richard Ferraro was a bank fraud analyst, and I don't mean tech fraud, I mean like just regular fraud analyst before we got him his first solution architect job at MUFG Bank. Ivan Tambo was working as a waiter before AWS hired him. As did Coyote, was another college student before AWS hired him. So it has nothing to do with your background. Now, I'm also going to tell you this, Simon, sometimes the engineers have the hardest time. Mark is a rock solid engineer who became an architect. Mark, what was your biggest challenge going from an engineering mindset of how to an architect mindset of how to design, how to build to how to design?
Number one is mindset. That's really the biggest challenge, is your mindset. As an engineer, you're looking for the details because you want to make the actual solution work in all the minute details, from what is my configuration going to look like? How do I manage my change window? I'm not so much concerned at that point, what does that customer actually do? I could care less at that point if the customer is a retail store that sells groceries or if they are a multi-billion-dollar company selling telephones. It's irrelevant to me at that point because I have specific tasks that I need to accomplish to make that particular protocol, whatever it may be, work. So it was a mind shift that I had to do, really the mindset to be able to look past it. So think of it like zooming out. I needed to start zooming out from all the detail and then start, first of all, with what does the company actually do? Whatever I'm going to recommend them on. Now, this applies to anything. It doesn't matter if you're trying to recommend a car, if you're trying to recommend a refrigerator. It doesn't matter if you're trying to recommend them a particular cloud or networking technology. It doesn't matter. Is you're trying to understand who the customer is, what do they do, and do you have anything that can help them alleviate one of their pain points or all of them? So again, you got to basically shift your entire mindset away from these things. So that's what I found out the biggest challenge, because guess what? And Mike, I know you were there a few years ago too, is you're comfortable with the technology.
Yeah.
You know how it works. You know how you can break it, how you can fix it. You know the ins and out. But with a customer in a business, there's always unknowns, always, no matter how well you prepare. You never know what you're going to get. So you tend to fall back on what you feel comfortable with.
Yes.
Generally speaking, that's the tech, because the tech really doesn't change that much. It's just packaged a little different, sold to you as something else, and here we go, you have SASE. So anyway, that's a different conversation. But the mindset, whatever you do, work on your mindset to get away from the details, look at the whole, and see how and why you can use a technology, not that you force the technology on the customer. It has to be from their perspective, not yours.
Yeah. And, I want you to think about it. So I once worked at a ridiculous tech company, and everything was tech. I worked at a great company called Cisco, but before that, I was the one that was focused on the tech. There was the VP of the principal consulting engineers. And he had said to me, this guy that you're going to go meet up, he needs a lot of help. He doesn't understand the technology. And then I met with the VP of sales, and they said, this guy's the best because he sells the most. When I met with this guy, he didn't know the tech at all. But he knew to call the right people, and he closed like 80% more revenue than anybody else. He was the highest paid sales engineer on the team. Why? Because he generated the most sales. So remember, we are measured by the impact we make on our client's business. We are measured by the amount of revenue we bring in, which is why we tend not to get laid off in bad economies. We are measured by customer satisfaction when we deliver presentations at key industry conferences. We are measured by the number of thought leadership documents we write for the external web page to drive sales. We are measured by what we do to improve the brand of our company. We are not measured by tech stuff. So stop thinking about other people that came from an engineering background, because it has nothing to do with what you really do. And not zero. I wish it did. But I got to tell you, Simon, when I've got somebody with 20 years of tech experience and I've got someone with 0 years of tech experience, I can't tell you who's going to get hired faster, because I've seen so many people with good tech experience struggle to unlearn engineering and learn architecture. And I've seen so many people with no background be great, like Raymond. He was selling perfume, but he got a beautiful solution architect job after our training, faster than the person he went with who'd been a cloud engineer for 10 years. They both ultimately got to the architect job. So show your impact, show your finance, show your business acumen, show your communication skills. That's what you get measured on as an architect. We are not engineers. I love engineers. They take my blueprints and build them and turn them into reality, but we are not engineers, and we don't get measured by engineering concepts.
I'm going to give you this example because I was in a unique position where I was actually part of an escalation. So if trouble still came up, large enough customer, I was still part of the escalation. And just to show you, once I completed the mind shift, the first questions I generally ask compared to what was done. So I was called in, customer's been having problems for well over 2 years. No idea why we took so long to get there. As soon as we got to the customer, the engineers explained to me what the problem was and how in the past they've tried to fix it. The first question I asked was, and this is the mind shift change, why are we doing it this way? Why? I wasn't trying to figure out fixing it. I was simply asking, why are we doing what we're doing? Because if I can figure out the why to something, then eventually I can get to the root of the problem. So in this case, they explained to me they were just patching it. They're really trying to find the root cause, try to fix it. They were just patching it so that the customer can keep working. Ended up going back to the customer, and guess what? Well, what is it that you do? Why do you need this? Try to figure out now the design, the actual use for this technology that was sold to them. And once we were able to figure that out, in this case, it didn't work that well in our favor because I had to tell the customer, you know what? You weren't really sold a good solution. This doesn't really fit your need. There's better things that we could have outfitted with you than this. So in that case, the customer did renew their contract, but let's just say they were less than happy considering for over 2 years what they paid for. So again, why? That's going to be the main question as an architect, as a designer, that you're always going to be asking is the why to something.
Yes.
All right, make sure you ask your questions, as long as I got Mike here.
Ask us your questions and we'll love to answer them.
All right, and I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Ian Boukton, or Boukton. Sorry if I mispronounced your last name. It says, hi, from the UK. I'm looking to move into an architecture role. 20 plus years in industry, mainly technical, but also leadership and management roles. Trying to find some direction.
So Ian, you know, it's funny. I just got called by a student of mine, Ian Rowe, who had a background very similar to yours, and we trained him, and he now has an extraordinarily good architect job over at Capgemini in the UK. And here's the thing. The key to remember is we are not engineers at all. So engineering is all about how do I build, how do I build, how do I build? Architecture is really about designing, presenting, and selling. Now, I'd love you to join us on our How to Get Your First Cloud Architect Job webinar. We can ask you questions, we can attest your skills, and we can be very prescriptive in what we give you after we know you better. But I'd like you to look at it this way. While the engineer might build, we will never build, if in the most cases. Here's the skills that you need to understand, that you really need. You need business acumen skills. Why? Our whole job is to design a solution that improves business performance. And what really are the impacts in business performance? People, processes, and technology. So we must, as a good architect, know how to re-architect the business processes or how the business operates. And we need to figure out optimal business processes long before we figure out the tech. We need that business knowledge to be able to understand the organization's challenge. Do they have operational challenges? Most do. Where are they? Where can you find areas of inefficiency? And what could technology do to solve them? For example, I may have an airline that may be struggling to purchase fuel option contracts. And maybe AI can make better fuel price predictions to assist them to knowing when to purchase this. So you need the business acumen training. You can get it from a program like ours, or you can get an MBA, one of the two. I did the MBA approach. Our students are getting hired straight out of our program, but you know, there's that. The next thing you have to understand as an architect, we're going to be selling. And if you can't sell as an architect, you will not be effective. And here's the reason why. First, we're generally paid and judged by how much we sell. Granted, we have a good base salary, but we have a bonus plan, and a lot of that bonus plan comes into the amount of revenue we bring into this company. But let's say we're a post-sales architect and we're working for a bank. Like I've got lots of people I train that work for banks in the UK. Let's say they design the most beautiful generative AI system and an algorithmic trading system, which can be cloud-based. And then they talk to the CIO, and both the chief investment officer and the chief information officer, and they try to present the solution to them, and they say no. Well, then that architect did absolutely nothing, because it doesn't matter how good their design is. If they couldn't sell it, it ends up in architecture documents and goes nowhere. The next thing is we've got to be able to lead. Now, it's saying you've done some leadership thing, which is great, but we are in a very weird leadership role. You know, Mark works for me. If Mark doesn't come into work, I can have a very serious conversation with Mark. It's real easy. But let's say Mark didn't work for me. He worked for somebody else. But now Mark is helping me with the project. Now I need to be able to motivate Mark to want to work for me when I can't give him a promotion or fire him, which is matrix management. And you got to get real good at getting people to want to work for you and lead them into that. So that's a totally different kind of management. The next thing, well, a lot of what we're going to do is we're going to be dealing with stakeholder management. Why? You know, in order to make our architecture successful, just because the CEO and CIO say yes, doesn't mean the department heads and the employees are going to adopt the solution. So I've got to manage them. I need to get very good with vendor relations and vendor management, because I promise you, there's no such thing as an AWS only solution for 99.999% of the world. Even if it's AWS, we're going to be dealing with Cisco and Palo Alto and maybe NetApp and other people's solutions to be part of it. So we've got to get pretty good at that. The next thing we need to be really talking about is, you know, the presentations. To pass an architect interview, you're going to have to give a presentations. But, you know, when you're dealing with these kinds of things, you know, you're dealing with one of the other things. So I hope that kind of gives you some things that you need to do. Download that free guide on how to become an architect. Join us for the free webinar, and I'll do anything we can to really assist you build your career please ask your questions. And if you want to add to that, Mark, please feel free to.
I really don't have anything else to add. I mean, you covered it nicely. I would probably say, and this is just my personal experience, you have enough tech, it sounds like it, or at least you've been in the tech sphere long enough. So I wouldn't place any more focus on that unless you're transitioning into a different domain like cloud, let's say that. Then you want to get up to speed with the limitations that a cloud has compared to a actual on-prem data center.
Yeah.
And then see also how the different cloud providers manage these limitations. But aside from that is focus on the business skills, just like Mike said. And I would say one of the critical skills is relationship building. Learn that. Learn how to build relationships with your customers, with the vendors, and see how this, and I'm going to butcher this word, I always get reciprocity, tongue twister for me, and practice the law of reciprocity and go from there. But focus less on the tech, focus more on the business now. And as Mike mentioned, you can get your MBA, you're going to pay a pretty penny, or you can pay a fraction of that, train with us, and also get the same skill and eventually be able to showcase your competency. Dingleman1, hey Mike, what would be your approach to creating a security policy for an enterprise?
Okay, Dingleman, it's good to see you. How's that new job going at the tech company? We've loved working with you. Let me know how you're doing in the new job. So to me, to write a security policy, I have to identify what I'm trying to protect. So first thing I need to understand is what are the assets that organization has? Because let's say they've got a $10 billion in intellectual property. I'm gonna have to spend a lot to protect that. Let's say they've got no intellectual property. I'm not gonna spend anything to protect that. So I'm only gonna protect whatever I need to at that point, just to protect the organization from security breaches. So we need to know what we're protecting. We also need to know what our threat matrix is. Some companies are at very big risks for attacking and others are not. So we've got to look at it. You know, who's the highest value targets in the world? Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Why? You break into their systems, you get access to like a third of the internet. So poof, they'd be the highest value targets and they need much more. Unfortunately, they can't do as much security as other businesses because they're a shared system, which is a story for another day, but that's neither here nor there. Next, I have to understand how the customers access the system, how the people work, because that's going to change people. Where are they coming from? I have to understand the customers and where are they at, because that could also have an impact. Then I've got to actually go and do an assessment of the people. I've got to find out what systems are, for example, do we have 8,000 character passwords, for which case people have sticky notes all over their desktop with their passwords, which is giving me a new security thing. I may walk in there and I might try to, sweet talk a receptionist and see if I can get somewhere. That's called a little social engineering. I'm going to go, and then I'm going to ask a series of questions. When I know what the business does, and I know how the business needs to operate, and then I know what I'm trying to protect in terms of assets, now I'm in a position to start thinking about how I might be designing a policy. So, Dingleman, it's kind of like internal medicine. And I actually think when I learned medicine, it was the best. It actually trained me on architect. We've got to ask all these questions before we get to the answer. And Dingleman, that's one of the ways I judge a good architect versus a bad architect. When I'm talking to somebody and I say data and they give me some AWS service, I know I can't hire them. And it's not because the AWS service isn't good, because they haven't asked the right questions to know what they're trying to protect. We can't be hammers in search of a nail. So it's a ask. And Dingleman, I know you and you're really smart. So think about the 800 questions that you would possibly ask someone before you would actually get the information. Think about asking about every single DMZ that they have. Think about asking about their operating systems. Think about asking about their assets. Think about asking about the people and their training. What kind of training do they need? Do they need training against anti-social engineering, anti-malware, anti-phishing? They're going to need all of it, but what else do they need? Only then are we in a position to really do anything.
I agree with you, Mike. I'm not going to add too much, but basically, what am I protecting and where?
Yeah.
And that should give me a general idea of what I'm dealing with. If I need to protect something in the cloud, let's say it's a high value asset that I got to protect in a cloud environment. I'm not saying it's bad, the security. It's actually pretty good, but it does come with limitations. And we're not going to go into those limitations, but it does come with limitations that I don't have if I have a data center or if I'm in a co-location. somewhere where I have more control over the actual infrastructure,
Yeah.
then my approach would be different compared to the cloud. But what am I protecting and where? And then I would go from there. Good question, though. Thank you, Dingaman.
Bring us your questions so we can assist you in your career. Tyrone,
You know, it's interesting. Oh, we got another question. There we go. All right, from Emperor Kiro. So more a physical approach like penetration tester. What are some certs when trying to become a security architect? Currently, I'm teaching myself Linux and SQL while taking my CompTIA class.
So Emperor Kiro, again it goes. So if you wanted to be a security architect, don't learn SQL. It's not related to our job. Now, if you want to be a data scientist, I'd say learn SQL. Mark doesn't know SQL, and I don't know SQL. Why? Because we're architects. We design systems.
I know how to spell it.
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't know how to run an SQL query. Why? It's not my job.
Yeah.
I've spent my entire life, Emperor Kiro, focusing on my job, which is why I was able to be a principal architect in 2 years. Now, I got to tell you, I had peers that were learning Linux and SQL. And guess what? When I became a principal architect, they still stayed a junior engineer because you've got to learn your skills. So if you want to be a penetration tester, learning Linux is going to be good. Learning Bash shell scripting is going to be good for a penetration tester. Learning Windows PowerShell scripting is going to be good for a penetration tester. Learning how to write Python would be good for a penetration tester. Learning how to get good at all the Kali Linux tools would be good for the penetration tester. Learning SQL so you could learn about SQL injection attacks would be great for a penetration tester. It really would be. But if you want to be an architect, you just spent all this time learning somebody else's job. So I would ask you this. If you want to be a doctor, would you go learn how to fly an airplane? Because what you're really doing is the same thing there. Well, so first, let's go to security. Now, architects. Now, I'm going to tell you there's no such thing as an architect certification. None, zero. The architect certifications out there are teaching systems administration, name of a source, and how to configure that, which architects don't do. So what is a real architect certification? A master's in business is an architect certification. To some degree, the Cisco Certified Design Expert is an architect certification. It is an expert exam where they talk about solving business problems with technology. And you give a presentation and you get asked questions. You don't build anything like the CCIE because it's an architect, not an engineering certification. The CISSP is a security architect certification. It really is. It talks about designing security policy and how to design systems. It doesn't teach how to build them. So they're there. So we have to, Emperor Kiro, break it down. Do I want to be a system designer, which is an architect, or do I want to be a system builder, which is an engineer? I want you to think about it. The people that design a hotel or a bridge or a shopping mall, you don't see them with a hard hat and a hammer to build it, because learning how to build does not teach you how to design. Learning how to design, like me, I'm an architect, does not teach me how to build. Believe me, I've been designing things for decades and I don't know how to build anything. Why? Because it's where I'm coming from. So kind of keep this in the back of your mind. I hope that kind of assists you.
And I'll add, when you hear the term architect, don't associate it with what you generally see out on the web, right? If you think about solutions architect, and then you take a look at what you're actually going to be doing, let's say on a certification, doesn't matter what vendor it is, you're building, implementing. That's really what you're doing. But when we speak architecture, we speak business. Why? And why does it work the way it does? So that's what you got to focus on.
Yeah.
So you're thinking high level. So instead of thinking of the bits and the bytes, or trying to figure out what the commands are to get an elevation level in Linux, or trying to figure out what is a query string to run particular on an SQL database, you're thinking about why would I use it and how do I apply it to business? Now, it might require you, though, to get a little hands-on just to clarify the concepts. That can happen. But that doesn't mean you're doing it for the purpose of implementing the technology.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Architect, business, high-level technology, and then being able to know enough about the technology so that you can apply it to a requirement that comes from the business. All right.
I think we can go to the next question there, Tyrone.
Yep. From Suzette. Incident and intrusion analysis and found only SOC or incident response. Do these need a degree or certs? Is there a better way to get the cloud, I'm assuming it means cloud solution architect? Are these positions AI automation pandemic proof?
Okay, so Suzette, you've asked a couple of questions, so let's break it down. Any analyst role is going to be the first to be laid off. Any engineering role is going to be the first to laid off. Any architect role is going to be the first to get hired and last to get laid off. And why? When you are in a customer-facing, revenue-generating position, you will most always often have a job. And here's the reason why. When the economy is bad, companies need to sell stuff. And architects help sell stuff so they can't get rid of them. Who do they get rid of in a tough economy like we're in now? Back-end engineers. Why? Because I can make my engineers work 12 hours a day versus 8 hours a day. And as an executive and say, you're lucky that you don't get laid off. Please work harder. Otherwise, we'll lay you off and we'll outsource it to another country for a third of the price. But my architects have to be local and talk to the customer, so they're the last to get laid off. And even in a bad economy, the company still needs to bring in money. So keep that in the back of your mind. So an intrusion attack incident analyst and a SOC incident response will be the first jobs to get laid off. And the reality is many companies won't even hire them in the first place. They'll have a consulting company that will do these kind of things for them if and when they need. So I wouldn't recommend going down that path. The best way to become a cloud solution architect or a cloud security architect is to train for one and learn the skills for the architect, and then you'll get you one. How do you become a doctor? You go to medical school. How do you become a lawyer? You go to law school. How do you become an airplane pilot? You go to flight school. And the reason I say this is so many people that I deal with as an architect, they've wasted 2 and 3 years. They've learned Linux. They've learned Python. They learn all this analyst stuff. And then they go on an interview and someone tells them, tell me about my organization's 6% weighted average cost of capital and how you use that to determine whether to build a private cloud or a hybrid cloud. And they're like, but I know AWS infrastructure is code. And they say, but that's not the job. That's somebody else's job. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So architect positions are generally, assuming you're doing your job and selling and bringing in revenue, typically very recession-proof and very layoff-proof. Now, any engineering job is very recession risk. And we used to have an extremely good cloud engineering program, Suzette. And I stopped selling it about 1.5 years ago. Chris and I made the decision not to sell people in a job that we thought would not have a good future. And here's why. AI can't do an architect's job. AI can't go to Mark as a chief technology officer, ask about his business, take him golfing, take him to dinner, develop the presentations, and then close a $200 million deal. AI can't do that, but an architect can. And $200 million, I've done a lot bigger deals than that. But AI, I can ask AI to write a Terraform script to deploy my architecture on AWS and Azure in about 3 minutes. And it can do it. AWS can write a Python script. I'm sorry, even ChatGPT could write a Python script, let alone half the things that are out there. ChatGPT can write a Bash shell script. ChatGPT can write a Windows PowerShell script. So try to think about, people cannot replace your wisdom. People cannot replace your ability to solve problems. People cannot replace your ability to bring in revenue. And technology or people can't replace your ability to develop relationships. So keep this in the back of your mind. Do this and you'll be great. Focus on the engineering, and in today's world, I really feel you will struggle. Especially because, but here's the good news, for engineers, now because it can be done by tech and it can be done anywhere, I can be sitting in my village in Greece and I can be doing engineering work, but a company would pay me in my village in Greece 1/4 of what they would pay me in the US. So remote work is great for the developing world. It's not so good for you if you're in the US, the UK. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind. It's a great
and I would add, very good question. I would just add to this, while no job is 100% foolproof of anything.
Yeah.
Especially when we think about something unprecedented like happened with the pandemic, people panic. Anything happens. You're likely of keeping your job though if you have meaningful impact on the business. And generally speaking, those are not going to be the full hands-on jobs, which is really odd because that generally keeps the infrastructure in place. It's generally those that bring in money, right? So if you're looking to do that, go architecture. Again, architecture equals business.
Yeah.
Go to that side. But I will put it this way. If you do need a job while you're getting training, while you're developing your skills, then take the job. Because you're going to need to eat, you're going to need to pay your bills.
Yep.
If you can get a job that somewhat is on the same kind of like track towards what you're aspiring to be. So for example, you want to be, let's say, a cloud security architect, and SOC is what you can get. At least it's still in the security realm. You see the incident response as it comes in, right? How do we respond to this? What are the attacks? So at least from that perspective, you gain some experience. And guess what? Again, we go back to this network, and not the computer networks, but social network within the company too. Because there, guess what? They're going to have architects and security architects most likely. So you're going to have then the opportunity at least to be able to talk to them. Again, speak with experts, gather information, and then find out how you can move up from there. You might be able to go from a SOC analyst to a architect in that same company if you were to take a role like that. So just keep that in mind. And when it comes to certifications and degrees, it's branding. Really, in the end, it's just branding, whichever sounds good. If you're going to do a, let's say, degree or certification because you want to use it as a framework, basically as a learning path towards something, do that. But don't necessarily get the certification. For example, we had the question about CompTIA earlier. I love the content, the knowledge that you get from CompTIA, but I wouldn't get the certification. Not because I don't like it, because it's been so downplayed as entry level that it does nothing good on an actual resume for you. So from that perspective, only get the certifications that are going to make you look good. If you want to get the knowledge from one, the framework so that you can learn, then pick whatever you like and what you think is going to be best for your career in that case. Great question, though. Question from Fola Shockey. Would business courses from a reputable business school as opposed to an MBA be worth considering?
Well, I wouldn't waste my time with business courses from a business school without an MBA. If I wanted to learn business, I would read real business books. I would actually read the textbooks that they actually teach in the MBA programs. See, what happens in a business school is you get some of what you want, and you get a whole lot of professors, you know, political perspectives, thought perspectives, philosophy perspectives, and a lot less of the education you want. So when you get an MBA, you're getting a stamp on your resume that says, I've done it and completed it, which shows a few things. One is you've got the grit and the determination and the will to work a full-time job and get an MBA. And two, you've got the stick-to-itiveness that you've stuck through it because it's miserable to do. And those things are meaningful. But there's a lot better information than taking these online courses. And I've been wondering why. I keep looking on resumes, people keep sending them to me. And they got like this thing from here and this thing from here and this thing from there. And it's like, I wouldn't list the 3,500 books that I've read in the, during my career on business. I just wouldn't. So, I wouldn't do that. So I'd get an MBA or I would get good business knowledge. Now, Fola Shockey, there are these programs which you get from a business school, which are $20,000 to $80,000, where basically you take that course and it's 1 year, and then they give you a certificate and you become part of the alumni network. That might be worth doing instead. And it's not going to hold as much value as an MBA, but there is some value there. But no, go out there and learn. Go out there and grade. The average business class is $477 per credit hour or $1,431 per class. My education to being a great architect was well over $300,000. Alonzo on my teams was over 150. Chris's would have been the same, but his father was like the dean or chancellor of an MBA school, so he got to go in a little cheaper. But, think about that and think about what it does and the commitment that you have to do it, and that shows a lot to others. So that's why I created our program. And I created our program because I knew most people couldn't afford to get this kind of training. I'm sorry, Chris's company paid for his as well. And I will tell you that my company did pay for a big percentage of one of my MBAs. So I like to get the job and I like to make my employers pay. I had well over $100,000 of leadership, sales, executive presence training, emotional intelligence training. Companies paid for that. I didn't have to pay for it, but why did they pay for it, Fola Shockey? Because when I was in these companies and I had me and the others, when from a tech perspective, we were all the same. I'm not going to say I was better than them. I wasn't. But I focused on communications. I focused on sales. I focused on bringing in money to the business. I focused on leading teams. And then my company said, Mike, here's the thing. You could keep focusing on this tech, but it's going to do nothing for you. Or we can get you to grow. Would you like to go to manager training? Yeah, I would. Would you like to go to training on difficult conversations? Yeah, I would. Mike, how about this CXO relative training? Yes, I would. And they brought in good consultants and they sent me to the greatest places to improve my presentations. They brought in executive coaches. So I wish it would. I really wish it would. But I'd say get an MBA or really spend some money and get some good education and get a good job like an architect where they're going to see you. And this is the worst thing ever, Folashaki. It saddens me, and it's true. When you go to these tech companies, they have two tracks. They have the leader management business track, and then they got the techie track. The techies are like the redheaded stepchildren of these organizations with a Greek family that looks like me. And they look at them and they're like, well, these are the necessary evil we need to get the job done. We need somebody to build it. Now, I love these tech people because they make everything possible. Without them, we've got nothing. And then they look at the architect or they look at the sales executive or they look at the manager and like, we need a good company. We got to put some money in our business people. And you've got a situation where they'll spend $150,000 on an architect's MBA and they'll tell the engineer you're limited to $10,000 a year in reimbursement. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. But that's why I've been focused so hard on getting people architect jobs, because I view it this way. Most people have to work. They have to work because they've got to feed their family, pay for their house, pay for their cars, what have you. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to go into work and be away from your wife, your kids, or your cat, I don't care. I love my cat, so my cat's always top of mind for me. I love my wife more, but I love my cat. And, for me, it's like, if I'm going to go in, if I could be paid $50 an hour or $300 an hour, I want to be paid $300 an hour. Because that means I can spend more time with my family. I can send money back home to my friends in Greece and my family members in Greece. I can plan for the future, retire anytime I want. And I retired when I was 34 because architecture was so good to me. I came out of retirement because I had no choice after seeing these certifications and what people were teaching. And it just terrified me that nobody was getting a job. So I went from my private coaching and my retirement to doing this full time. And you can see our students that are working everywhere now. Good question, Folashaki.
Now, what
love when you come
one
around.
Tiny thing.
Yeah, please.
In regards to, instead of just going for a business school or MBA, go for the full package. If you're going to do it right. If you can persuade, sell your current employer to put their skin in the game as well and kind of finance it, even better. And some alternative that I have found that's quite good, while it is a little biased, is find use cases. All these companies out there, this is part of their marketing. They're going to put all these use cases out, how great their solutions was. You can read those because in those use cases, they'll tell you what industry this customer was in, what problems they were having, and at least what they can divulge, and how the vendor claimed their technology was able to solve that for them. That's in general what we architects do. Now, you're not going to have all the details of it, but that in itself can give you a great foundation for doing more research on certain terms, verbiages, trying to figure out is maybe put yourself again in the mindset, is that something I might have done? Why or why not? If you don't understand something, again, research it. But that entire is a business case. A use case is a business case. And you can do that for free because they'll put it up for free. It won't cost you a thing besides some time and effort. Just keep that in mind.
And Folashaki, I want to talk about why I talk about sales skills so much. Want a promotion? Convince your manager why you're worth it. Want a raise? Convince your manager why you're worth it. Here's a conversation I had many years ago, and it was something to this effect. And this is why you need sales skills to sell your employer to pay for your $150,000 MBA. I had a conversation that was very similar to, I sold about $240 million of solutions last year. The average sales engineer was a solution architect. I can't remember, as a sales engineer, it was a short 6-month time where I took a sales engineering position, sold $126 million. I said, so I've pretty much doubled the revenue. And I said, and I feel like I'm doing it like an amateur. Imagine if I helped the team sell 2 times more than the average team and I'm untrained. How much more I could do if I was training? What if I had sales training? Could I go from 240 million to 300 million? What if I had more business acumen? Could I take it to 400 million? And I showed him that, look, that $150,000 was nothing compared to the amount of money I brought in compared to what it could do for me. It was a very easy conversation to get what I needed. So I really want you to think about that. I always talk about sales. Why? If I want to go to dinner, I got to sell my wife to go to the Ethiopian place because I promise you she wants to go to the Greek place every day of the week. I love Greek food. It's home for me, but I like Ethiopian sometimes. When I want to go to the beach and she wants to go to the posh 5-star hotel, and I want to go to this place that's not fancy, but it's on the beach, it takes a little bit of sales. So learn to sell. That'll be the best thing you can. And you'll be able to sell your manager on paying for your education. And you'll be able to sell your manager into promotions and raises and work from home and any other thing that you want.
Great question. All right. Next question, Mike, from Valdez Brown. What is your recommendation for a cloud engineer? I'm currently studying AWS Developer Associate Certificate.
Okay, Valdez, the first thing I would tell you is not to waste your time on the Developer Associate Certificate. And I'll tell you why. If you wanted to be a software developer, I would tell you to take the AWS Developer Certification. But if your goal is to be a cloud engineer, not a software developer, it's kind of like an airplane pilot going to law school and getting a certification in law. It's training outside of your career and into another career. So what do I want you to do? I want you to be a better cloud engineer. So I know why you're doing this. There's 2 or 3 certification providers that unfortunately I have to retrain all of their clients because they're coming out with the wrong skills. In fact, that's why I started this company, because I saw what they were doing. And it's the same reason we give free AWS certification training on our YouTube channel, because I want people to be successful. So if you want to be a cloud engineer, and I would be very cautious with engineering careers, I would do the following. I would learn Linux, because cloud engineers are going to be on Linux all day long. And that means Linux administration, how to add users, how to add services, how to lock down the operating system, how to install applications. Linux automation, things like cron tab, things like bash shell scripting. If I wanted to be a cloud engineer, I would learn Terraform, because infrastructure as code is going to be everywhere. And we're never going to be using things like CloudFormation in the world where 98% of the organizations are multi-cloud. To get rid of that stuff. Now, I'd also learn Windows Server and Active Directory if I wanted to be a cloud engineer. Why? You're going to be dealing with Windows Active Directory, or whatever the new name of it, for your identity and access management. For the enterprise, it's going to be federated into your identity and access management. For the engineer. Now, for the engineer, I would get really good at the command lines for at least multiple clouds, because there's no such thing as a single cloud in today's point. Now, if I was going to be the engineer, I think I mentioned Terraform, but you're going to have to be really good at Terraform for infrastructure as code. Now, if I was a cloud engineer, I would be learning some DevOps things too, and DevOps tools. And not necessarily these AWS code pipeline kind of things, but more the regular DevOps tools that are going to be used across clouds, because 98% of organizations are multi-cloud. So throw away anything proprietary that's part of your AWS certification and focus more on the big ones, Jenkins, Spinnaker, whatever the other, Chef, Puppet, whatever those AWS tools, those DevOps tools that work across all clouds. Kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So those would be the things that I would do. I would get hands-on, hands-on, hands-on. Now, which certifications would I do? The AWS Solution Architect Professional is a engineering certification, not an architect certification, so I would do that. I would probably do a Terraform certification, because that's going to look really good. And for the cloud engineer, I'd actually consider the AWS DevOps Pro, even though I wouldn't consider it for anybody else. And instead of wasting your time on a developer associate and a DevOps associate, skip all those things and do 2 certifications, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional and the DevOps Professional, and get a Terraform, and then you're going to be solid. And if you wanted to do any more certifications other than that, and architects, never more than 3, because it detracts from our brand. Engineers can get 4 or 5. You could potentially do a Red Hat certified engineer to show some good Linux knowledge, which would be good for an engineer. And potentially even a Kubernetes administrator one. And that's the max number of certifications. But I want you to understand this. The AWS certifications are going to be some of your lowest value certifications. Let's talk about why they're low value. They promote biased thinking And they also don't teach you anything other than the name of a service and how to configure that service. And Valdez Brown, what separates a great engineer versus a weak engineer? A weak engineer knows how to configure something, but they don't know why. A truly great engineer understands the underlying technology, how the technology works, how to performance tune it, how to make it do better and better things. So I hope that makes sense to you. So get deep, don't get wide. You know that now you're going to have a rock solid engineering career. But Valdez Brown, please do consider this. Engineering can be done by artificial intelligence. AI can write that Terraform script. It can write that Python script. It can write a CloudFormation script, not that you will use it. It can write a Bash shell script and a Windows PowerShell script, but AI can't do things like architecture. It can't present, it can't sell. So if you choose to go down an engineering path, and I love engineers, I'm not saying don't be an engineer, make sure you also focus on your business skills, your leadership skills, your communication skills, your emotional intelligence. Why? Not only will that add an additional $50,000 to $100,000 to your salary every single year, if and when organizations reduce their engineering staff because they need less because of what AI can do, you will be indispensable and incredibly valuable because you will have the skills to not only do the work, but make an impact in the business. And engineers like that are incredibly well paid. They're typically called distinguished engineers. And I know distinguished engineers like that are earning $500,000 a year because they're great. But again, it's not just the tech. It's never just the tech. It's what the tech can do for the business. So I hope that helps you. Valdez Brown, I'd love you to ask more questions. I really would. Mark has a rock solid engineering background. If you've got any more engineering questions, Mark can add a lot to this because Mark knows a lot about engineering.
Actually, I wanted to add something to this. Again, if you're going to sit, and this is for, and don't take this wrong, but any cloud certification, if you're going to sit for it, meaning you're going to pay for it, and you're going to get it, go only for the professional ones. Actually go for this and pay for those. The associate ones, take them, compare them to the professional one, and see what overlaps and what doesn't. Then study from the associate what doesn't overlap and move on to the professional one. So gain the knowledge and move on. And the reason I say that, this whole cloud certification business, because that's really what it is, it's a business, and not just cloud, but networking, security, it's all really a business, is relatively young. So it's going to take some time to truly develop into something that's going to be worthwhile. Right now, most associate cloud certifications are kind of like flooding the markets. They don't hold up their value. So it's not going to be worth your while.
No.
Once all that's settled out, most likely what will happen, again, and I'm not predicting this, this is just my personal opinion, is I think what we know as professional now eventually will trickle down and be actually an associate one once it matures. And then it might be worth more than just a piece of paper right now. So again, go for the professional ones, pay and sit for those, or have your employer pay for them if they're going to pay for it. Take the professional exam guide, take the associate, compare them, see what overlaps, then only study from the associate what does not overlap, and move on from there. And don't waste your time paying for it. It's the same thing with the comp, as we mentioned with the CompTIA, right? The knowledge might be great, but in the end, it's not worth much else, unfortunately. Otherwise, I love CompTIA. I actually, oh gosh, I don't even know how many years ago, I actually studied the A+ and the Network Plus because I didn't know. So I studied it. That's what I was told. Never got it, but I just studied it. So hope that helped.
And that's extremely good. And Valdez, I saw your second comment that you're changing careers. Tyrone, please put in the chat box the how to change careers. Valdez, I'm going to tell you, I became an expert at changing careers many years ago. And most people don't, well, actually, most people don't know it. Maybe they do. I used to practice internal medicine before I went into tech 25 years ago. I just loved tech so much that it was like, okay, you know, my internal medicine office or tech. And I found myself spending more and more and more time in tech. And I actually had to develop a system on how to change jobs. So keep that in the back of your mind. It's a wonderful career, Tech Valdez. Welcome. I hope you love it as much as I did. And I hope it's a really good experience. Out of curiosity, which industry were you in before? Mine was healthcare.
I'm going to add something for you, Valdez, too. I was in a whole different field. I wasn't doing tech all my life. I was in something totally unrelated, eventually went to tech. What I loved about the tech was that a lot of the stuff that you're learning, it's like 20, 30, 40 years old. That's how old it is. It's been invented. Try true, that's what it is. It doesn't change. It's black and white. That's what I always love. until the vendor, they take it, they repackage it because they got to make money or to figure out eventually a combination, such eventually how we got to SD-WAN, how to make it all work. But that's the great thing about a tech professional career is that it's black and white, especially from the engineering side. Now, the architecture, the skill set is, I would say, pretty standardized. You want to sell, present, persuade, those are great skill sets. Now, how to apply it? Well, that's going to be ever changing when it comes to an architect. But engineering, black and white, it's really good.
Warehousing, that's a tough job. This tech thing will be very easy for you once you get in it. Congratulations and welcome to our world.
Right. Do we have any more questions?
We've got a couple.
Oh, fantastic. From Fola Shaki, what if out of spite, your manager doesn't want to promote a person? Perhaps, for example, when they were that person's age, they weren't IS qualified. Interesting question. How would you perceive that, Mike?
For Fola Shaki, before I get there, I'd say first thing we have to make sure is we're identifying the correct problem. 90% of the time when I found someone that told me they thought they had a problem, it was actually the wrong problem. For example, I remember at one point people said, my manager's unreasonable. And I asked them a couple of questions. Did you ask this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And they said, no. I said, well, if I was your manager, I'd probably be upset too. And kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So we have to make sure we diagnose the right problem. Now, if you have a manager that for some reason doesn't like you or someone on the team, they need to leave and get a new job. You can't have a job where your manager doesn't like you. Because here's what companies do. Every year, an employer stack ranks their employees from the best to the worst. And who do you think they let go when they have to do layoffs? Their worst employees. And they may not actually be the worst employees. They're the ones that the managers don't like. So please, if you're in a company or you know somebody that's in a company and they're not well liked, upgrade your skills and go somewhere else. But, we have to identify that's the correct problem. Me and a buddy of mine who came from the same ethnic background and applied for the company. That person that went before me said they didn't hire me because I'm from this background. A day later, I went on the interview and they gave me the interview. They gave me the job. So clearly his diagnosis of they couldn't hire him because of his background was wrong because we had the same background. And, these are the kind of things that we have to do the right problem. So I'll give you an example. When I was a kid, Pepsi decided to hire Michael Jackson, who was big at the time. And they hired these all-star NBA and baseball and football players. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Coca-Cola, who was the dominant software manufacturer in the world, lost like 30, 40, 50% of its market share, and it all went to Pepsi. And poof, what do you think Coca-Cola did? They didn't identify the problem was with their marketing campaign. They didn't say, maybe we need, I don't know what's going on in my background to say I generated. Maybe we need some sports professionals. Maybe we need Michael Jackson or somebody like Michael Jackson to capture the audience. No, they decided to change the formula for Coke. They thought Pepsi was sweeter, so let's make Coke sweeter. Okay, poof. Fast forward a couple of months. Now the people that like Coke don't like the new formula, and even more people are going to Pepsi. And then there was this commercial of Pepsi said, well, people didn't like the old Coke, so they came to Pepsi. So then there's the new Coke, which they don't even like anymore, but now there's the old Coke, new Coke, which is the original Coke. And that it turned it into an absolute disaster. So we always have to think about what problem we're trying to solve. Pepsi hired athletes. Pepsi hired people that were competitive, and of course it did so great. They hired some really good people. So we have to solve the right problem. I doubt with 85% certainty somebody doesn't dislike someone because of their age. Now, there's still 15% room in my mind that there's there. I'm thinking it's typically something else, and you've got to find the heart of that. It's kind of like if I come home from work and I bring my wife a pizza, for example, and she growls at me and she's like, that's fine. It's probably not the pizza. It's probably something else that I did that I have to figure out what it is in order to figure out how to fix it to make my wife happy. Thankfully, my wife and I don't argue a lot. We love each other very much. We're married 28 years, which means I say, yes, dear, you're right, and I'm sorry, pretty much every day of the week, and things work out. But, kind of think of that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, I want to give you my personal experience. This was many, many moons ago, as they say. I went into a job interview. And eventually I didn't get the job because of specific requirements that I didn't meet that I found out later. But initially, when I walked into the actual interview, I couldn't believe my eyes. The person that was interviewing me was actually a person whom I was playing against in a soccer tournament. And we just happened to beat them not too long ago. So when I did get the job, I thought, it must be because we beat them there. They were very standoffish. Little did I know that it wasn't, I really misunderstood them. I didn't have all the facts. I didn't get to figure them out. It was all from my perspective. The person doesn't like me because of X, Y, and Z. And I ended up finding out what it really was is I was such a rookie. I was trying to sell commodities and securities. I figured they'll sponsor me. I get my Series 7 license. Well, here's the thing. They weren't looking to sponsor anyone. And before I can get my Series 7, I need my Series 63 license just to be able to get there. And that was the reason why I wasn't hired, just because they didn't have a program like that in place. It wasn't because I beat them in soccer and, my illusions of why they didn't want to hire me of what it was. So many times I would say it's really miscommunication. And if you do have hard facts that this is why they don't want to hire you because of discrimination, and you can't do anything about that, like Mike said, if you need to upskill and leave, because that company does not deserve you to begin with. Follow-up question by Fola Shaki. Is there a cap on an architect's earnings potential without them attaining a C-suite position?
There's a cap on everything in life, but there's plenty of $1 million a year chief architects that work out there. So I don't consider that to be a pretty big cap. And in the end of the day, here's what it comes down to. If you're a good architect and you're closing big deals, you'll be given thousands of shares of stock grants each year. And I have friends that are solution architects at NVIDIA that, I'm sure the 5,000 and 10,000 shares that they were given each year because they were in a leadership position turned into something pretty big in the terms of millions upon millions upon millions. The amount that you sell and your global bonus can be hundreds of thousands of dollars difference more than someone else. Your leadership skills and your business acumen skills can again be incredibly big. So kind of think of it in the back of your mind that there's a cap on everything, but what you can actually do as an architect earning-wise is extraordinary. And I want you to understand why. If I'm dealing with a company that has $20 billion of sales, and that's nothing for the kind of companies I work with, and I can help their sales go up just 1% through some kind of technology thing, we're talking with about $200 million a year of bonus benefit that you can provide that business. 1%. Now, if you can generate $200 million of revenue for a company and their margins are 60%, that means they've got $140 million in net income. They can pay you $2 or $3 million bonus, and they're still $137 million ahead. So your pay is based upon the value delivered to your client. And that's the secret. Focus on the tech. Your value is not that great. Not because you're any less important. You're not. It's just as important. But focus on the business and you're impacting a bigger lever, which has got a greater return on your time, energy, and education capital. So that's why it depends on what you want to do. Look, I studied internal medicine. An internal medicine physician gets paid $200,000 a year. Why? There's a whole bunch of us. There's lots of us. Internal medicine physicians, nurse practitioners, physician assistants. Now, I know a knee surgeon in Vail, Colorado that charges $20,000 for a knee surgery and does 4 a day and only accepts cash. That guy's getting $100,000 a day, or $500,000 a week, or $2 million a month, or $24 million a year. That person didn't go to school any longer. They didn't spend any more money on their training, but they chose a skill that was very rare and extremely in need. And if you're a professional athlete or a wealthy person, you've got knee pain, you go see this person in Vail. So that's the key. Your earning potential is based upon you and where you position yourself, the types of problems that you actually solve. So get yourself a good architect job, focus on the business acumen, focus on revenue generating, and focus on making a business impact, and then you become eminently more powerful than Mark and I as BGP experts. And believe me, Mark and I are BGP experts, and I would love nothing more than to get geeky and set up an MPLS-enabled backbone with 5,000 routers and set up our eBGP peering to every internet service provider in the world. And Mark and I would have more fun with this. We'd spend a whole summer with this, and we'd be drinking beer and eating pizza every night. It would be party time. I'm telling you, we would. Not that either one of us eats grains, but we love it so much. But we wouldn't earn anything close to that than if we actually made an impact in somebody's business. But we would love doing it. And I know me and I know Mark.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. When you think about, Mike, we have our CCIEs of what it took to get these type of knowledge you need to do. Even let's say that you're in the bottom rank of the CCIE pool, right? Because even within CCIEs, there's levels, just like anything in life. It takes a long, long time to get the type of knowledge. And unfortunately, it is an engineering role to begin with. It's an implementation role because you're good, right? You're really good at the job. It still doesn't pay you as well as it should. Even though we're talking 6 figures, it still doesn't pay you as good. So you want to keep that in mind, that the value is perceived by the customer. And generally speaking, like Mike always says, architects impact what? The bottom line of the business, how much money they actually generate. So your cap, I would almost say unlimited, depending on how much you want to make, right? If you say, I need to make $50 million in a single year, I don't know how many companies will be able to pay you that. But over your lifetime as an architect, depending on who you work with, that might be a potential. Just something to keep in mind.
Tyrone, let's go to Omar's because he heard us discussing the engineering career, and I don't want him getting confused. So you can read that, Mark.
All right, from Omar. Mike, did you say Kubernetes and Linux is good for solution architect career?
So, Omar, I was talking about engineering careers. Architecture careers are business acumen, sales skills, executive presence, presentation skills, and the knowledge of networking and data center. Omar, why don't you come to our How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar on Thursday? We can have a full conversation and also download the complete and total list of skills. Now, those skills that I was talking about when I was talking about DevOps and Linux and coding, that's only for engineers. We architects will not be allowed to touch our clients' systems in 99% of cases, and these are not architect skills. So I didn't want you to think you should go learn Linux and Kubernetes. Now, learning container orchestration and Kubernetes from an orchestration perspective, of knowing how you have your control plane and where you've got your worker nodes, that is important. And knowing when you would use a microservice-based application versus a monolith, that is also important. And understanding the trade-offs between microservices and monoliths, because with everything you gain something, lose something. That's important for the architect, but the architect doesn't touch the tech. So Omar, no, that we were referring to engineering when that person's questions.
Yep. For all that I hear, generally speaking, when you hear say architect, we always talk about the business side of architects, not what is generally out there floating on the internetworks in regards to what they perceive an architect is. Right. Next question. Fola Shoki, out of the box, who is more aligned to the role of a cloud architect? The strategy consultant or the software engineer?
Fola Shoki, the strategy consultant. I want to make it clear. There's nothing that software engineering or software development has anything to do with a cloud architect. And why is that? What is the cloud? It is renting space in somebody else's network in a data center. And data center technology is not software. Data center technology is compute, such as virtual machines and containers. It is storage area networks, such as block storage, object storage, and file storage. It is load balancers and reverse proxies. It is routers. It is switches. It's databases. It's firewalls, IDS, IPS systems. None of that is from software engineering perspective, so none of it. So when you start out as a software engineer, you basically have to start almost from scratch. Why is that? Because you're talking code. Now, if I said to Mark, "Posisa Simita," in Greek, and he said, "I'm fine today," and then he spoke to me in Croatian or Serbian, that's knowing another language. But I got to tell you, knowing Greek didn't teach me how to design a network and a data center solution. And Mark knowing another language is also not going to help him learn a network and a data center certification. So knowing how to do it. But a strategy consultant is an architect. You know what strategy consultants are called? Business architects. And what do? They meet with the client. They ask about the client about their business goals, business pain points, and business challenges. They learn how the business operates. They learn the business processes, and they may help determine which people, processes, and technologies needs to be changed. I learned more about being a cloud architect in my days as a strategy consultant than any other job I had other than learning to practice medicine. But software engineering has nothing to do with what we do. Nothing. Strategy consulting has everything to do with what we do. Hope that kind of makes sense.
100% agree. Strategy kind of gives it away. Anyway, let's move on to our last question here, Mike, so that we can make sure that we're on time today to keep backing up and getting ready for the conference. The question is going to come from, I hope I pronounced it right, Agurchu. They ask, hello there. I'm a self-taught developer, just placed my AZ305 yesterday. So I have both Azure Admin and SA certificates. No IT experience, nor its qualification. Got the BSc degree in biomedical science. Do I have a chance in getting an SA gig in South Africa?
Okay, so Argerchu, and I hope I got your name right. With what you have right now, the answer is no. With the right training, you will absolutely get a job in South Africa. Right now, behind the scenes, there's a great cloud architect. His name is Tyrone. He lives in Cape Town and he works for us. He's in the chat box by the blue wrench name Tyrone. He's a great guy. I've gotten many people jobs like Porsche, cloud architect jobs in South Africa. But you have to understand that what's in the certification has absolutely zero to do with the job. What's in these certifications is the name of a service and how to configure it. But you know what we don't do as architects? Configure anything. We don't write code. What we do is we ask clients about their business. We identify business processes or how the business operates. We redesign systems on how they actually work. We give presentations. We respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. We sell solutions. We manage vendors. We manage stakeholders. About the only thing we don't do is anything contained in those certifications. Those certifications should be labeled the cloud admin. But you absolutely can go and get hired. And you can do wonderful with it. So here's my recommendation for you. Come to our How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar on Thursday this week. Download the complete free guide, and that will give you every list of skills that you need. Now, the good news is you said you've got your degree in biomedical science. That will be much more beneficial to you than actually the certifications, because when we're dealing with biomedical science, we have to deal with things. For example, if I'm trying to design a an internal defibrillator, an AICD, that's a defibrillator as well as a pacemaker, I have to understand that I need the right kind for the patient. I need to understand what's going on with the patient's heart. Do they have an SA node dysfunction or they have an AV node dysfunction, for example? And if I know where the problem in the heart is, then I can figure out what kind of problems and what kind of biomedical solutions, external pacemakers, internal pacemakers, pacemakers plus defibrillators. So your biomedical background will probably give you more background than any of these certifications. But yes, you can easily, with the right training, get a great job as a solution architect in South Africa, but not with what you have right now. And I've gotten lots of people jobs in South Africa. I've gotten people jobs in Lagos, Nigeria. I've got employees in Cameroon as well that are really rock stars. And there's no part of the world that you can't do. And South Africa is a big hub. I would say Nigeria and South Africa are your two best options in Africa. There's obviously other wonderful places there, but they're two big economic places and you've got lots of options. So yes, you can get hired. Yes, you will get hired if you get the right training, but unfortunately the certification piece is just not it. Come to that webinar. You can ask us questions. We will cover the job. We will cover every skill. We will cover how to get through those job descriptions, how to get your resume directly in the hands of the hiring manager, and how to prove that you're awesome. And I want to actually get to Valdez's actual question. And I want to talk about opportunity cost and the time value of money. So the question is, I'm 63% done with my AWS developer training. Should I finish it and go to the professional certs that I recommended earlier? So Valdez, I want to talk about the time value of money. Let's just pretend right now you want to be an architect. A cloud architect on average earns $1,000 a day. So if you were to spend 6 weeks as an architect wasting your time on an unrelated certification, you would cost yourself $30,000. A cloud engineer earns roughly $500 a day, maybe a little less than that, but let's say it's $500 a day. Which means if you wasted 6 weeks on an AWS developer training, which will do nothing for you in your career, you wasted $15,000 of your time, effort, and money by learning the wrong things. Now, it's not just that. Not only is time a precious commodity, not only are you losing out on good money, but you've only got so much space in the mental hard drive. And the more irrelevant nonsense you shove in there, the less focus you'll have for what matters. So the best way to be most successful in life is to find those 80% of find the things that are the most critical. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be 20% of your skills that are going to be the most critical. Focus on the most critical things, the most critical things, the most critical things, and be really good at it until you get hired. And then after you get hired, I'd be focusing more on business acumen, communication skills, leadership skills, and that's going to be the thing that takes you to the top. Unfortunately, we're not vampires. We don't live thousands and thousands of years where you can spend time. Mark and I are both in networking. Between Mark and I, we've got about 40 years of networking experience between the two of us. Guess what? Mark knows more about software-defined networking and SASE and these virtual network solutions than I ever will. And I know more about IP multicast than 99% of the CCIEs that are out there. And we're still in networking, let alone the cloud, which is a network in a data center and everything else. So that's the key. I want you to be great. I don't know where you're at, but I like to watch gymnastics and I like to watch Simone Biles. She's like a little fireball. She does these vaults that are sky high in the air. She flies like a squirrel from bar to bar and never falls. She's like near perfect. I mean, she's like a machine. She's so much fun to watch. You know what Simone Biles doesn't do? She doesn't do marathon running. She doesn't do rowing like crew. She doesn't play basketball. She does gymnastics, 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 strength and conditioning for gymnastics, diet routines for gymnastics, recovery techniques for gymnastics. And that's what I want for you. I want you to be the best of the best. I want you to have a career like nobody ever imagined. And I want you to be on the top end of the curve of the pay scale. So I recommend you focus on your career. Let everybody else learn their jobs. Because at the end of the day, if you were I'll take you out of the position of the learner and put you in the position for a hiring manager. I need a network expert, and I know Mark, and Mark's whole life is spent in networking. Do I hire Mark? Or do I hire the person that was a dog walker, an airplane pilot, a Linux admin that knows a little bit about networking? I hire Mark. I did hire Mark. He works for me. He's awesome. So think about it. Now, if you were a patient, would you want the surgeon that's done nothing other than surgery for the last 20 years? Or the person that, they did plastic surgery, but they didn't like it. Now they did orthopedic surgery, didn't like it, and now they're your family doctor. Think of who you would go to. So go be the best, Valdez. Go build a career. Be the top of the top of the top and reap the rewards. That's what I would say for you. So to finish up today, we are celebrating our 3-year anniversary scale and this exciting conference that we're having on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We're going to be up in Orlando with some of our students, some of the people that have been hired, and I'm all excited to do it. And it's 3 years of people getting hired at Amazon and Apple and Cisco and IBM and Microsoft and Google, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, British Broadcasting Company, JP Morgan Chase, and every other prestigious organization in the world. And we're celebrating it with 50% off site-wide. Of our cloud architect program, of our interview training programs, of our enterprise architect programs, and we are excited. Also, on Thursday, we've got our completely free How to Get Your First Cloud Job webinar on Zoom. We'll talk, and we'll spend 90 minutes, and we'll answer any career questions you want. It'll be on Zoom, so we can have a face-to-face conversation and make it meaningful for you to truly help you in your life. And we've got a completely free document on how to get your first cloud architect job that will cover the skills and everything you need to be hired. So download it. It is all free. I'd like to thank you so much for spending the afternoon with you, and I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the day.